Hey, so we are about to read chapter 21 of Half Upon a Time. Don't mind my hair. It is pajama day for my class today. So, we've gone through a lot of hills so far in our story. The very last climax we came across was that Jack ran into the forest because he heard me scream. He got knocked out. He saw the prince knocked out. That big wolf was chasing them. But come to find out that wolf is the king wolf, and he's actually on their side. So I think we're at a polling action of how they're going to solve the problem to get May. So we're going to have to see what happens there. All right. The prince blinked at his uncut hand. How curious, he said. You must have done it wrong, Jack said. Give me your hand, I'll do it. Oh no, the prince said, backing away. The last thing I will do is give you a knife along with permission to cut me. Jack grinned. You seem to forget I've been carrying around a sword since I met you, he said. Yes, but you have not been trying to draw my blood with it, Philip said, then paused. At least not that I know of. Jack sighed. Just give me the knife back. I'll do my hand first. The prince handed over the knife, and Jack held it steady in his right hand while grasping the blade in his left. He jerked his left hand over the blade with a grunt, then opened his palm. No blood. What's wrong with this thing? Jack said, shaking the knife. Let me have it again, Philip said, and ran it along his inner arm. Again, nothing happened. I believe it's defective, he said, then thrust it at a nearby tree. The blade sank into the dead tree up to the hilt. Jack and Philip both swallowed hard, while the wolf smiled slightly, saying nothing, watching everything. Looks like it works, Jack said, his voice wavering a bit. They'd been so quick to cut themselves with it, he was suddenly very glad they stopped experimenting when they had. It must be magical, the prince replied, his voice a tad shaky as well. Perhaps it is charmed against cutting flesh. Jack stepped over to the tree and pulled the knife out. It slid free with no resistance. Experimenting, he ran the blade along the tree, and sure enough, the barest cut separated the wood like it was slicing bread. He shivered. I guess I should have known that it'd be charmed, Jack said. We did find it in a witch's cottage. You what? Philip said. Jack grinned at him. Why do you think I let you go first? The prince narrowed his eyes, but let it drop. Either way, we still need blood, he said. The two of them looked at each other, then down at the sword Jack had laid on the ground. It wasn't until just now that Jack realized that the wolf was closer to the sword than they were. Fortunately, the animal didn't seem to care. The princess awaits, the wolf growled, still almost smiling. Surely you can provide a few drops of blood without my help? That was enough to get them moving. Right, Jack said, grabbing the sword from the ground. He held the blade out to the prince. Ready? Philip nodded. He repeated the process he tried with the knife, and with a quick jerk followed by a flinch, they finally had blood. Jack pushed the sword into the dirt a bit to support it, then cut himself in the same manner as Philip had. If you please, the wolf said, patting over. He opened his mouth to release a red tongue about the size of Jack's hand. First Philip, then Jack squeezed a drop of blood onto the wolf's waiting tongue. The animal swallowed both with a smile, then went still for a moment, his eyes half closing. Finally, he turned back to Jack and Philip. You speak the truth, the wolf confirmed. Therefore, I will take you to the princess. Thank you, Philip said, using Jack's knife to cut a bit of his cape off to bandage his hand, then did the same for Jack. As it turned out, May wasn't much farther down the trail. When they found her, she was lying on the ground a few feet off the path, her eyes closed. The fairy in her hair was asleep. As well, though. It wasn't exactly new. As soon as they spotted the princess, Jack and Philip ran to her, and both gently tried to wake her, but nothing worked. The wolf waited patiently for them to exhaust their efforts, then said, I place a simple spell on her. If you allow me a moment, I shall wake her. Jack stared at the Wolf King. But why? She did not know me, he replied, padding over to the sleeping princess, but keeping his eyes locked on Jack. And she screamed. I could not let her reveal our position to her kidnappers. The wolf managed to look a bit sheepish, which must have been difficult for him. I did not yet realize that you were her servants. Servants? Jack repeated indignantly to Philip, who didn't look thrilled with the label either. The wolf, meanwhile, moved up alongside May, then stopped and closed his eyes. As Jack watched, the air around the animal seemed to shimmer, wavering in the light of the sword. Beneath the shimmer, something was happening. Something unnatural. The wolf's hind legs stretched out grotesquely, while his front legs shortened. His front paws unfolded into hands, while his back paws pushed out, narrowing as they went. The wolf's snout shortened as they watched, shrinking back into his face, while the black fur all over his body receded, disappearing entirely in places. The shimmering abruptly stopped, and where the wolf had stood now knelt a human. A shaken Jack glanced over at Philip, who just nodded. Apparently the prince wasn't surprised that the Wolf King could take human form. As the man, stood up, the remaining fur on his back fell loose almost to the ground, covering most of the man as a cloak. Underneath the cloak were a black tunic, trousers, and boots, all the same color as the fur had been. The man's face was covered in hair, from a very shaggy head to a full beard. Though his eyes were sunken into his head, Jack noticed that the man's pupils were the same fiery red as the wolf's eyes had been. The man knelt at May's side, then waved his hands over the princess's face. And just like that, the princess woke up. "Hey, Philip!" May screamed as she came to, apparently not realizing that time had passed. As the princess sat up, the slumbering fairy tumbled from her hair to the ground, where she woke up as well, only a lot less scared and a lot more irritated. The princess started to scream again, then noticed the hairy man kneeling at her side. She stopped abruptly and took a look around, then caught sight of the prince, mostly because Jack had taken a few steps backward. "Philip?" May said, confused. "What happened? The last thing I remember is some gigantic animal attacking me. And who's this?" she asked, nodding at the large hairy man at her side. She started to say something else, then saw Jack. Instantly, she was on her feet, her mouth open in surprise. She took a step toward Jack, but the wolf's spell must have not fully worn off, as her legs didn't support her. She fell forward, but Jack was there, throwing his arms under her shoulders to catch her. "Jack," she whispered, a huge smile on her face. Jack noticed a bit uncomfortably that their faces were just inches from each other. Right," he said, looking down. I came back." Instantly, the princess's eyes iced over. Right," she mimicked. "You, came back. You came back after abandoning us to go into this freaking possessed forest alone." She stopped abruptly and swayed a bit. "Why am I so dizzy?" Jack and Philip both reached for her, but May made a point of ignoring Jack's arm to take Philip's. "Do you remember the Wolf King I mentioned in my story?" Jack asked her, trying to ignore the look she was giving him. He nodded at the huge hairy man beside her. "This is him." May turned around and looked the man up and down, then turned to Jack. "I don't know how to break this to you, but I'm pretty sure that being hairy doesn't make him a wolf." The man bowed low. "I am the king of the wolves, princess," he said with a smile. "I've learned a few tricks in my years, turning human being one of them. It made carrying you quite a bit easier than it might have been." Jack stepped back while Philip explained what had happened to the confused princess. She took it all remarkably in stride, even going so far as to try to cut herself with a knife. "Huh," she said, when it slid off her palm. "I also learned the identity of your grandmother," Philip said slowly. "I don't know what to say." May shrugged. You learn to live with it. Trust me, I have less reason to believe it than you people, but with everything that's happened, it's the best explanation we've got." The wolf smiled, showing far too many teeth. "I served your grandmother for many years, and she trusts me implicitly. For this reason, she directed you to me. After all this time, she knew I could be trusted with your safety, and with her own. If she is in danger, we must rescue her with all possible haste." "The thing is," May said, "we don't exactly know where she is." "That should not be a problem," the wolf said. "I can track anything once I have it sent, and I know your grandmother's scent by heart. However, if she were anywhere in these kingdoms, either east or west, I would have sensed it already." "Wait, what?" May said. Jack tended to agree with that sentiment. This was not good news. "Well, where is she then?" he asked. "Do you think I would keep it from you if I knew?" the wolf asked, sneering a bit. Jack ignored him and took a step toward May, who was shaking from the news. The look she threw him, though, set him back. "Okay, fine, hold your grudge," Jack said, "but there still might be a way to find your grandmother." "How?" Philip asked. Jack reached over to May, hooked a finger under her necklace, and pulled it out. "We could use the magic mirror," he said softly. And so we'll have to see if they are able to find Snow White, which is May's grandmother. Check back tomorrow for chapter 22.